Hey everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day. And today I wanted to tell you about our latest house call, which happened just this morning in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. We went to a home of somebody who is moving, and we found some amazing books by small independent presses. So I thought today we could talk about small presses, independent presses, and specifically how two particular small presses influenced the writings of two of our most famous 20th century authors, Virginia Woolf and Charles Bukowski. Two names not often combined together, but certainly were in this library and probably in libraries all over the country. Let's start with Virginia Woolf. Now, Amanda, do you know much about her press, the Hogarth Press?
I know nothing about her press.
Well, then I think you're going to find this very interesting. So when Virginia Woolf turned 33 years old, she resolved, along with her husband Leonard, to buy a printing press and to start printing her own books. And do you know why she wanted to print her own writings?
Were other people refusing to print her?
Probably two reasons. Yes, I think the most important reason, as she said, was because she could write and publish her books exactly the way she wanted to write and publish her books without any interfering male editor or hand or anyone telling her to do something differently than what she wanted to do. And this is important because many 20th century authors, especially during that period, were heavily edited by their editors. And imagine what would have happened to Virginia Woolf's work, especially experimental work. And we have an example of one here called The Waves, which we're going to get to in a second. The other reason that she enjoyed doing it was because she found it a relaxing way to manually unwind after writing. So she loved to set type. And did you know she set the type for her own initial books? They called it the Hogarth Press because it was in their dining room in their house, which was called Hogarth House. And they developed a logo, she and Leonard did, with a wolf on it. Now this is a later one. The Hogarth Press eventually sold out and is now sort of, as most presses are, part of the larger Penguin and Random House conglomerate. But in the old days, it was literally done. Now, Virginia Woolf not only set type for her books, she set type for some of her friends in the Bloomsbury group. Quite famously, she set the type for T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and her hand shook as she put every letter in the right place. And what's interesting to me, Amanda, is the degree to which the act of being a printer or a typesetter influenced the art of writing for Virginia Woolf. And this is something we don't always think about today, but you can really see it in a book like The Waves. Now, I wish I had the Hogarth Press edition. This is actually the American first edition, not the British first edition. The British first edition would have said Hogarth Press, but it's the same jacket illustration. The jackets were designed by Virginia Woolf's sister, who was an artist named Vanessa Bell. And Virginia Woolf loved her sister's designs because she felt that there were certain things, emotions, themes, which words alone could not convey, but which art could convey. And listen to how she describes, this is Virginia Woolf writing in an introduction to an exhibit of her sister's work. She says, "No stories are told, no insinuations are made, and the puzzle is that while Mrs. Bell's pictures are immensely expressive, their expressiveness has no truck with words. Her vision excites a strong emotion, and yet we have dramatized it or poetized it or translated it into all the blues and greens and fines and exquisites and subtleties of our vocabulary. The picture itself then escapes." So in addition to allowing her to incorporate the illustrations of her sister, there were also very interesting aspects of the way the space in the type played out in the novel. This is an experimental book in part because it doesn't have chapters. It just has a series of monologues. And but she visualized the amount of space between the introductions to the monologues and the monologues themselves, which is just a very interesting way to think about a book. And she went back and forth as the book was being typeset. She also described her writing as, this is Virginia Woolf now writing about The Waves in her diary. She said, "Perhaps I can now say something quite straight out and at length, and need not always be casting a line to make my book the right shape, but how to pull it together, how to compose it, how to press it into one." And writing actually became very similar to the art of pressing type or compressing type into individual lines. And so we had this wonderful press, this fantastic history, and something which helped literally shape how Virginia Woolf wrote her novels and became the amazingly admired writer that she is today. but they also had a huge collection of books by Charles Bukowski. A totally different 20th century master, but one nonetheless. And if you know anything about Bukowski, you know that his books were published by a press called the Black Sparrow Press. So look at this great stack of Black Sparrow books that we picked up this morning. And these are all books that were published in the 1970s. Now, here's the interesting story with the Black Sparrow Press. It was done by a man by the name of Rob Martin and his wife, Barbara. Martin collected the works of D.H. Lawrence. And one of the things that frustrated him about D.H. Lawrence was that D.H. Lawrence switched from publisher to publisher over the course of his career and had all these different editors doing to him what Virginia Woolf was very careful to make sure didn't happen to her, which was constantly messing with what he wanted to write. And he thought it would be great to have the opposite, to become a patron to a particular artist and then publish all their work just the way they wanted it continually over the course of their career. And he actually sold his first edition collection of D.H. Lawrence, there's something you can do, to a university in California for $50,000 to start the Black Sparrow Press with his wife. And they began the press by going to Charles Bukowski. Here's a book that we've seen on By Day before because we did a signed copy, but Bukowski was working at a post office at that time, and he was writing for avant-garde sort of magazines. He didn't have a lot of time in his day to write, and Martin went to Bukowski and said, how much money would it take for you to quit your job at the post office and write exclusively for this new Black Sparrow Press? And do you know what he said, Amanda?
I don't.
He said $100 a month. He needed $35 a month at least for rent. He needed $15 for child support, $15 for alcohol, and like $20 for groceries.
Priorities.
But he would quit the post office. And Martin said, "I'll give you $100 a month for life. You come write for me." And he wrote book after book after book, which became runaway bestsellers and ended up making them millions of dollars, both for Martin and Bukowski. But look at these beautiful books, and look at the designs of these original printings from the 1970s. And what you see, Amanda, is that you see an emphasis on typeface, right, and design. And these original covers were all letterpress printed, and they were original works of art, all done by Barbara Martin, the wife of the publisher. And they helped make Bukowski different, because up to that time, Bukowski had been published by conventional publishers that published books. Here are some Virginia Woolf ones that I brought in this sort of smaller format, right? And Black Sparrow is the first to say, we're going to go with the big size trade paperback. So all the big, large trade paperbacks that we have today, we owe it to the Black Sparrow Press. And he literally said he didn't care that bookstores across the country couldn't fit them in their slots. They'd have to get new racks because Black Sparrow was going to be big. Since I brought the Virginia Woolfs, I'll just show you. Look at how awful a lot of the covers of the recent Virginia Woolfs are compared to the original covers that Hogarth Press and her sister designed, and it's sort of interrelated in that sense. That is the story of the Black Sparrow Press. They were also one of the first presses to issue signed editions at the same time, signed and limited editions. And we are very fortunate to have all those Bukowski books. One general trivia question about Bukowski, Amanda. Do you know why he's famous in the world of independent bookstores?
No.
Not only because he sells well, but do you know he is the most stolen author in survey after survey across the country. Let me say one last thing about Black Sparrow. They did get into some trouble after Bukowski's death in 1994. They kept publishing Bukowski as lost poems again and again. And so a lot of the books that you have post his death were actually heavily edited and aren't the original writing of Bukowski. So if you're looking for books, try and get the early ones from the 1970s and not the later compiled editions. Here's a book that could only have been published by a small press. Are you ready? It's not only a small press, but it's a small press in Germany. I just found it funny. It's The Joys of Water Boiling.
Sure. Now,
what major commercial publisher would possibly publish this book, Amanda? I don't think any, but you can learn about the joys of minimalism. That's an important thing. You can learn about the joys of mobility, which you get with your water boiling. And you can certainly learn about the joys of economy and saving, which you get from water boiling. An entire book on the joys of water boiling, our independent press book of the week. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll watch next week and every week right here on By Day Friday for more adventures in the world of books.